Hi, can you hear me? Great, thank you. All right. Well, welcome to today's class. My name is Melissa Crum, and I will be your presenter. Today we're going to go over L&I and your liability when you're working in the agricultural industry. Today's topics are going to include, are you an employer, an independent contractor, a farm labor contractor, as well as how to control your workers' comp costs. So let's go over L&I as a whole. So L&I's mission is to keep Washington safe and working. Within that mission, we also have 5 goals: to make workplaces safe, to help injured workers heal and return to work, to make it easy to do business with L&I, and help honest workers, businesses, and providers by cracking down on the dishonest ones. And 5, to ensure L&I is an employer of choice. So in order to stay in line with our mission statement, we operate as an industrial insurance firm. A lot of people consider L&I to be a tax, but we are an insurance firm. The premiums that you pay in your quarterly reports go into the state fund, and they are used to pay for the cost of claims. The one thing that's kind of different and special with Washington State is we're one of the few states where workers share a cost of their workers' comp. And I'll show you a little bit later kind of how that actually goes. So the other great thing is employers aren't paying the actual cost of bills and cost of claims. So just like with any other type of insurance, insurance is there to protect you as the employer as well as the worker, to make sure that injured workers can safely return to work and make sure that employers can continue to do their business. And there we go. There's the purpose: for injured workers to get that medical treatment, for employers, liability protection. Back in 1911, when workers' comp first started in Washington State, many employers were going out of business because they were unable to pay bills. Every time somebody got injured on the job, they would have to go to court and argue whether or not the claim was valid. So injured workers and employers and lawmakers got together, and workers' comp is what they created. So let's go into first independent contractors. So the important thing to note is everyone that you see on the screen there could be an independent contractor. However, being an independent contractor does not mean that you're not also a covered worker. In some cases, you may be paying someone with a 1099 and they still may be covered under the state fund. So let's go ahead and take a look. So why does this matter? Well, when an injury happens, we need to know who is responsible for paying those bills, right? If somebody's injured, that generally means that there will be a hospital visit, and we need to make sure that the workers are able to heal. And if you're not paying for their insurance premiums, then that can raise rates for everybody else. So we want to make sure that employers and workers are sharing in the cost. And if you're found responsible to be an employer and you do not have workers' comp coverage, the claim will be accepted. An audit will go back 1 to 3 years of records to determine the premium due, plus penalties and interest. And you may be eligible for 50 to 100% of the claim's costs, actual or estimated, as a claim penalty for being an unregistered employer. So, forewarned is forearmed. Make sure you know your liability and you know whether or not you have covered workers or independent contractors. So let's look at what is an employer. An employer we have a law around it, and an employer is basically someone who is contracting a person rather than a business. So it's personal labor rather than contracting an entity or an independently established business. And if you're an employer, obviously you must pay workers' comp, you must comply with wage and hour requirements, you also may need to pay employment tax and maintain a safe workplace. And just so you know, the definition used by the IRS and L&I for independent contractors are entirely different. You can be an independent contractor under the IRS and be a covered worker with L&I. All right, so like we said, being paid by the 1099 form does not automatically exclude you from workers' comp. And the only way to know is to take the test. So let's do that. So first off, we need to know, how can we tell if the contractor or worker is reportable? Well, first off, are they under Washington state jurisdiction? So are they somebody who lives, works, or was hired in Washington state? If they work for the federal government, or if they're working on tribal land, or if they're covered under another state's coverage, might affect whether or not they are in fact a Washington worker. Next, we're going to look at two different tests. The first test was developed in 1911, and it is a very broad test to see whether or not you are hiring labor or hiring a business. The two main components are you bringing employees to perform the work, or are you bringing your expertise to operate your heavy machinery? Test number 2 is a little bit more complicated. It was developed in 1992 when technology was really booming, and the definition of an independently established business was more than just, do you have employees or do you have heavy or major equipment? When we're starting to use computers and detailed software, the definition of heavy and specialized changes. So they took a different approach, and they looked at the 6 or the 7-part test. The 7-part test is only for construction, so it won't be a super large focus with us today. But the 6-part test really delves into, are you independently established and can you prove it? All right. The personal labor test. As we stated, it was in 1911 that it was enacted. And basically what was happening was we had this logging industry coming in, and workers were getting injured, employers were going out of business. And they needed a way to say, okay, who can be covered and who cannot be covered? What does insurance look like, industrial insurance look like for the state of Washington? So they looked at, are they bringing their own logging equipment? Are they bringing a backhoe? Are they bringing a large metal lathe? Although that seems like it would be a little bit difficult to transport. Do they have their own work crew? And most importantly, is the person who's contracting this work supervising the contractor or their employees, right? So if you're supervising them, then you're not contracting them to do a portion of the work. You are, in fact, directing and controlling the work being done. So they would be your workers. So this is the first filter that we look at to determine whether somebody is an independent contractor in Washington state. It's still used today. It's under that RCW. You can go ahead and take a look at it. It's on our website. And all right, so the next test is the 6-part test. And the first thing that we look at is, are they free from your direction or control? This honestly is the grayest area of all of the 6 parts. It's fuzzy because what does control or direction really mean and look like? So some questions to ask yourself are, do you schedule when they take breaks? Do you schedule their hours? Are you giving them training? Do you provide them tools, materials, or supplies? Do you have multiple contractors working the same job? Because if you do, that means that you have to coordinate between them. So there is supervision and control there, because you are supervising how they are interacting. Same if they are working alongside any employees that you have, because again, you are supervising their work. You're telling them how to coordinate with your staff. So they are not truly independent. The next one is their service must be outside the usual course of your business, performed outside of all places of your business, or the individual is responsible for the costs of the principal place of business from which the service is performed. So what this looks like is, do they have a service or product that you do not provide? Are you hiring them to come in and do something that your business can't do? Or do they work from a different location than you? Or if they're working in the same location, are they responsible for all of the costs of that business location? So for instance, if you have a contractor who is bringing out a trailer that they are parking in a field to work from, and they're responsible for paying the electricity, the water, all of the costs of that trailer, that can be considered a place of business, even though it's on your property. That it's, do they have a place of business from where they're working that they pay for? All right, the third part is the individual is either customarily engaged in independently established trade, occupation, profession, or business of the same nature that is involved in the contract of service, or the individual has a principal place of business that is eligible for a business deduction for IRS purposes. This one's a little bit hard to digest, but it basically means, are they an independently established business? And is that business the same business providing the same services that you've hired them for? So if you have somebody who's coming in and putting down floorboards and they have an independently established logo graphic design firm, that doesn't count. It has to be doing the same work as the contract states, or they have to have a business place that's eligible for an IRS deduction. So some ways to look at that are, do they have other customers? Do they advertise? And again, do they have that IRS qualified business location? All right. So 4, 5, and 6 are very similar. Right? The individual is responsible for filing a schedule of expenses with the IRS. The individual has established an account with the Department of Revenue and other state agencies as required. The individual is maintaining a separate set of books and records that reflect all items of income and expense. So really, 4, 5, and 6 look at, do they have to follow the same requirements as you do to operate a business? And can you show proof that they are keeping separate books and records? And so in conclusion, as you can see, the use of a 1099 form is not alone enough to determine workers' comp liabilities. Know your liability, keep sufficient records, and you'll avoid penalties. All right. So now we're going to go into farm labor contractors, because an independent contractor and a farm labor contractor are different. Before I go into farm labor contractors, does anyone have a question on independent contractors? All right. If you do, please go ahead and type it into the chat. I will capture any questions for later answer, or we can answer them during the presentation. So a farm labor contractor is someone who is bringing people, recruiting people, soliciting people, employing people, or transporting people that are agricultural workers. And it's kind of a large definition, but it basically simplifies to, are they bringing people? Are they supplying people for agricultural work? So, sure. So it appears that we have a question in here in the chat. So, can I have someone on my farm 1 day per week as an independent contractor and they file their own taxes, or do I hire them as an employee? So If you're going to hire an independent contractor, you have to make sure that they pass the 6-part test. So first off, you can run them through the personal labor test. But if you have someone who is working on your farm 1 day per week, you need to ask, are they bringing heavy specialized equipment? Are they bringing their own work crew? And if not, they have to pass the 6-part test. So it doesn't matter if they work 1 hour in a month or 1 day a week, or if they work every day. So we will go over volunteers a little bit later in the presentation. So just be careful with the independent contractors that you're making sure that if you have any questions that you reach out or you go through the test online. There is an online version of the test that you can do. So personal injury insurance is different than workers' comp. So you need to have workers' comp in order to cover for industrial injuries. Personal injuries is different. So your liability, right? So personal injuries are what happen to you outside of work. So if you don't have industrial insurance, then again, like we said before in the presentation, you will be subject to fines and you will be out of compliance with the laws. So if you don't know if you need to have workers' comp, then you should contact your account manager, or you can contact me and I'm absolutely happy to go through that test with you. Okay. So we're going to continue with farm labor contractors, and then we'll get into volunteers a little bit later. So a farm labor contractor must show the workers their licenses and pay the worker with statements itemizing their hours and their rate of pay. So they have to be the ones, whether or not they're taking those workers to work somewhere else, or whether they're just doing the hiring process, they have to show people what the job description will be, what their terms, their employments, their worker rights, as well as making sure that they show them that they are in fact eligible for being a contractor of labor by, again, showing those licenses. So you need to make sure if you are hiring a farm labor contractor that they are in fact licensed, and you can verify their contractor or tradesperson's license on our website. And you need to make sure that they are paying their workers' comp coverage. If they are not, you might be held liable for paying their workers' comp premiums. So please do make sure that you verify whether or not they're in good standing. Any questions? All right. So what risk classifications are for farm labor contractors to report in? So with this one, it's pretty easy. The farm labor contractors are going to be reporting in the risk class of the work that they're doing. So if they're going to a winery, then they'll be reported in the winery risk classifications. If they're going to a dairy farm, they will go to and report in the dairy farm. So we have a question in the chat: how are the rates determined for workers' comp? In the state of Washington, rates are determined by a slightly different process. So right now we're talking about risk classifications. So risk classifications are set by your nature of business. So with the state of Washington, we look and we say, what are the jobs that you're doing in that nature of business? So if you're a dairy farmer, you may be transporting people or animals. You will probably be doing some milking. Those types of activities are all covered under one risk classification. Risk classifications have a base rate. That base rate is set annually. So, whether that base rate is set annually by the department, and then you as an employer have the ability to affect that rate. So with your experience factor, which is determined based on the number of claims that you have on your account, your rates go up or down with that experience factor. Whether if you have good experience, which means that you don't have a lot of claims on your account, that number goes down, which means you're paying less than the annual rate. If you have lots of claims on your account, that experience factor goes up, which means that you're paying a little bit more than the base rate. And this is to cover the cost of claims. All right, so farm labor contractors are to be reported in the risk classification that applies to the work that they're doing. Contractors, though, who provide both equipment or machinery and the machine operators are reported in a separate risk classification called custom farm services, because the process of operating that machinery is the same no matter if they're going to a wine farm or a flower farm. It's the same type of work. All right, so now we go into volunteers. So volunteer coverage is not mandatory. Volunteer coverage for workers' comp is optional. However, for-profit businesses are presumed not to have unpaid volunteers, right? So whether or not somebody is on their place, they're assumed that they're going to be compensated. If your volunteers are compensated, that means that they're covered workers. So whether or not that you have a contract of hire, if you're paying someone, pretty much they're going to be your worker and you will need to report them. So volunteers cannot receive any compensation beyond sustenance and aid. So they can have a sandwich for lunch, which would be considered sustenance, but if they're getting anything like housing, parking spaces, or reimbursement for travel, things of that nature, they are considered a covered worker. So volunteer coverage, so if you do actually have volunteers, just know it's only going to cover those medical care costs because true volunteers are not compensated. All right. So for-profit firms can have some types of volunteers. Student volunteers are one of the few types of volunteers that a for-profit business can actually have. However, they have to be part of an accredited program. So they can't just be a student who comes and volunteers on your farm. They have to be receiving credit as a part of a school program in order for them to qualify. And so let's look at the difference between what a student volunteer and an unpaid student are. So again, being enrolled in a school, participating under a program that's authorized by the school versus participating in unpaid work that is not authorized by the school. And then both of them usually perform duties without wages, but one of them is receiving credit, and the other, like a certification or degree, the other may receive other types of reimbursement. Okay. So what about internships? Because internships are not the same as volunteering. So paid interns must be reported in your business risk classification. So they are employees. They are just like anybody else that you've hired. An unpaid intern is basically a volunteer. So again, they have to be working for credit in a school program for that certification or degree. And each scenario with this is on a case-by-case basis. So what's changed for employers reporting their volunteers? Well, there's a new method for reporting volunteer hours. So you can still do the actual hours worked for all volunteers each quarter, or you can assume that 100 hours were worked per volunteer per calendar year. So if you have somebody who you've hired in January, you would assume that they would have worked 100 hours per calendar year. If you hire somebody December 1st, you would still have to assume that they work 100 hours per calendar year. And you don't get to choose if to have some people reported under actual or some people reported under 100. It's all or nothing. So yes, you can still use actual hours. Can you report in both methods? No. So you have to pick one method and stick to it. And you can change your reporting method at the start of each year. So what records do you need to keep? So it does say keep your records for 3 full calendar years. I would say keep them for three full calendar years plus a quarter, just in case. Doesn't hurt to keep them a little bit longer. What are the things that you need to keep? Well, you need to know who they are. You need to know Social Security numbers if they have them. You need to know what organization they're volunteering for. You need to know when they started and when they ended, what risk classification you're reporting them in, and whether or not you're doing the actual hours or 100 hours per volunteer per calendar year. And then again, with those students and unpaid students, you need to know that proof of registration that they are enrolled in a school or institution for higher education, and that authorization. And here are some resources for you. So you can go on to our website, to lni.wa.gov, claims insurance, learn volunteers, and find out who's a volunteer, who can cover volunteers, who can't cover volunteers, and the difference, as well as information on reporting volunteer hours. Or you can call your account manager and they can go into that for your business specifically. All right. Any questions on volunteers? Okay, then let's go ahead and get going. So we're going to go over a little bit about cannabis because it's a new industry. So just like any other business in the state of Washington, if you're a cannabis farmer, then you do have to comply with industrial insurance regulations. So you would pay workers' comp just like anyone else. And workers, just so you know, cannot waive their rights to workers' compensation coverage. So you can have them sign any contract that you like, but if that contract says that they are waiving their right to workers' comp, that contract is null and void, which can mean the entire contract is null and void, not just that specific part. So, forewarned is forearmed. So how do you control the costs of your workers' comp? And we went over this a little bit with the question about rates. So how do you control this cost? Your cost of your workers' comp, there's that base rate that's set annually, but the rest of the cost is determined about your claims. So the best way to prevent your rates going up is to prevent injuries from happening. So here at the department, we have a number of programs that can help you with a prevention plan, with a response plan. Again, those quick responses to near misses and injuries are crucial in making sure that you have a safe work environment and that you're preventing claims from starting. The other thing that you may want to look into is the return to work and the stay at work program, because both of those have benefits to you as the employer to help your workers, as well as reimbursements for keeping them on at work, which can be very beneficial. So where do you go on our website to find out some more information? You go to lni.wa.gov/controlmyrates. And again, you can see here we have claim-free discounts. So if you don't have claims on your account, your premiums will go down. You will get that claim-free discount. You can calculate your rate. You can see we have a little video on there on rate setting, which goes into it a little bit more in detail. There's a claim and account center where you can delve into your personal account to stay on top of your claims, as well as to really look at what's happening with your account. You can see what requirements you need to comply with the Stay at Work program to make sure that you're taking advantage of those reimbursements for having light duty jobs available for your injured workers. You might want to check out the retrospective rating groups. So they can be a way, if you are having a safe work environment and maintaining a safe work environment, you might qualify for a retro group where you would get a refund of partially of your premiums every quarter. You also might want to take a look if you are paying a higher rate. You may want to look at the risk management or safety consultations so that they can go over your account in detail with you and look to find ways of making your workplace safer and less likely to get claims in the future. All right. And who do you contact for help? Well, you should always contact your account manager. They are the person that is in charge of your account, of setting your risk class, of talking about your rates, and going over your reporting requirements with you. If you have a claim, you would want to contact your claim manager, and you can do that through the listens line. And then again, those safety and health consultants are really beneficial for you, and they are free of charge. If our safety consultants go out and they find a risk, they will ask you to comply and fix the risk, but other than that, it's free of charge. And what should you do when an injury occurs? If you're running a business, most likely you will have injuries happen. You need to make sure that you encourage the worker to seek medical care. If for any reason it comes about that you are suppressing a worker's ability to file a workers' comp claim, that's called claim suppression, and it is illegal. And there are heavy penalties and fees if you are responsible for doing that. You must complete the employer's report of accident. And honestly, it's really beneficial if you do. You can tell your side of the story, give accurate wage information, as well as if the claim is not a legitimate claim, that's a good place to, again, tell your side of the story. Make sure that we understand that it was not legitimate. And then it's a really good idea to stay in contact with the worker and bring them back to work as quickly as possible. All right. Does anyone have questions? So some common questions that we've had before, which we'll go over now. What about self-insured status? Self-insured is really only for large employers. And when I say large employers, I mean Boeing, Fred Meyer, Costco. You want to look at national businesses, businesses that have such a large employee base and such a large profit that they can be responsible for the entire cost of a claim. So the only employers that can be self-insured are ones that can prove to the state that they can take care of claims the same way that we would with L&I. There is a process for doing that, and we do have a publication online that's available with more information about self-insurance. But again, it is only for employers that are enormous. So while you guys are thinking of more questions, let's go over a couple of questions. Yes, Caesar is up to talk about the farm intern pilot program next. But a couple of questions that have come up before are, if you're a farm labor contractor, can you bid for work before you have a license? The answer would be no. You have to get a license beforehand. And what if you have a contract with an agricultural employer and you personally perform the work? If you have a contract with an agricultural employer to complete agricultural activities which you do yourself, then a farm labor contractor license is not required because you're an owner. So you would not be contracting other people. All right. Anybody else have any other questions before we let Caesars talk about the farm internship pilot program? All right. Well, thank you very much, folks. Enjoy Caesar's presentation.
All right, can you hear me? Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Laura, and thank you, Melissa, for introducing me. My name is Cesar Sanchez, and I'm the Farm Internship Project Coordinator for the Department of Labor and Industries. I just want to give a brief background about me. I've actually been with Labor and Industries for a little bit, over 2 years now. I started off as a customer service specialist and worked in that position for close to 2 years here. But last year, I actually got hired as a farm internship project coordinator. So now I'm here working with the farm internship project. My primary job is actually the project coordinator for this farm internship program, but I also deal with farm labor contracting. So I know Melissa went over a little bit about farm labor contracting. If there's any questions that you guys have, I'll provide you with my information at the end of the presentation here, and you can always shoot me an email, give me a call, and I'll be happy to answer your questions. So let's go ahead and get started with the farm internship project. I know some of you probably want to go home, so I'll do this fairly quick, and I'll try to make it sweet and short for you. So the farm internship project, what we'll be going over today, the purpose of the farm internship project, and why we as Labor and Industries decided to bring about this project, participation requirements, how to get certified, what a farm internship agreement is, and possibly other farm internship or other internship options that you may have if the farm internship project doesn't apply to you, or maybe you're not in the county. So we'll start off with the purpose of the farm internship project. So we first started off as a pilot project in 2010, 2011, with only 2 counties. We actually started with Skagit and San Juan Islands. But after a few years of successful participation of farms and completing the project, in 2014, legislature finally allowed LNI to establish the farm internship project within the agency. This project is the only one of its kind in the nation, but it is, however, a temp project. So that just means that it has an end date. It's actually supposed to end December of 2019. But hopefully, we're hoping that if farmers support the farm internship project, we can keep the project going, and that'll ensure some interns to be able to participate. So the purpose of the farm internship project is mainly to allow interns to safely work on small farms, to learn about farming practices and get some real hands-on experience in these farming activities. There's actually 2 major reasons why, and actually I'll list them here. The first one is to train the next generation of farmers. In 2007, the Department of Agriculture conducted a survey on the average age of a landowner or farmer, and it looks like the average age was 57 years old. And that was around 11 years ago. So you can imagine now they're closer to the 68-year-old mark. So they're actually getting older. There's not the younger population. They're not farmers. So some people want to learn about it. So we thought this would be a great opportunity to train the next generation. So often these new farmers come from non-farming backgrounds. So since they don't have the experience, we try to give them this opportunity to expand their knowledge on agriculture. And there are a few formal training programs for the beginning farmer. So this will have them work closer with farmers and the owners. That way they can get the most information they can from actually doing the hands-on activity. And the second reason is it helps minimize legal risks and ensures compliance. So this is actually, prior to this farm internship project, interns, they wouldn't be covered in an event of an injury. So this actually helps protect the farmer's assets in such event, and as well as the intern. That way they know that they are covered for sure under workers' compensation. This also helps them comply with regulations. Farmers sometimes don't really know the rules and regulations of labor and industries. So this helps them keep in check, making sure that they're doing everything legally. And then finally, the farms may be out of compliance with the wage and hour regulations, workers' compensation, industrial insurance requirements. Again, this is just to make sure we keep them in check, make sure that they're doing the right thing. for the employees or the interns as well as the farmers. Okay, so I'll go ahead and go over the requirements to participate in the farm internship project. So like I said, we started off with 2 counties, but now we've actually expanded to 20 counties. As you can see, we've got Chelan County, Clark, Cowlitz, et cetera, all the way to Walla Walla. And then these are the counties that, if the farmers are in these counties, they can participate in the project. If they are outside those counties, there's always other ways they can participate and have interns. So we went with small farms. A small farm, well, I guess it must be considered a small farm. They can be sole proprietorship, they can be a partnership, corporation, LLC. Any of those would count in order to participate. They do have to make 250,000 annual sales or less. So nothing over 250, just because we want to focus mainly on the smaller farms. And they show us proof with the IRS 1040 Schedule F, and lines 1, C, and 2 are the ones that we actually look at when it comes to that form. And third of all the owners and operators, they provide regular labor to the farm, so they're present and they're able to demonstrate and teach on the job skills. And they work closer with the farmers so they can actually learn the correct way. Okay, so why did we choose small farms? Usually, like I said, is because they have the owner or operator present. They're able to demonstrate and teach those skills that are needed for farming. Work is diverse and also often manual, and it does vary throughout the day. And this gives the intern the ability to learn a broad range of tasks and not just one repetitive type of task, which is what usually an employee would do. So I'll go ahead and move on to the next screen. Okay, so another requirement that we have for the farm internship project, they have to have no serious violations or penalties of the Minimum Wage Act or industrial insurance. Industrial insurance meaning workers' compensation. And they have to be up to date with workers' comp. Let's say that they owe money to labor and industries and they still want to participate. That's okay as long as they've got a payment plan going on and they're on track to be in compliance with labor and industries. And we do look at the safety and health as well, just in case they have any type of case open. We want to make sure that our interns go to a place where they know that they'll be safe. And also, as long as it does not create unfair competitive labor cost advantages, doesn't depress wage of experienced workers or displace experienced workers. So they can't just hire these interns for free labor. That isn't what the program is about. It's more of teaching the younger, less experienced generation about farming. That way, like I said, they're not used as free labor, cheap labor. This is more of a learning opportunity for the intern. And like I said, the farm must provide an education for these interns. It's very important that they do this because, like I said, this is an intern opportunity, so they should be learning about the farming aspect of this program. We focus on how the intern feels in regards to the curriculum, and I make sure that curriculum is well structured and is designed to provide those vocational knowledge and the skills for future use for these future farmers, you could say. The farms participating in this program, they can hire up to 3 interns at a time. They can hire as many as they'd like throughout the year or throughout the time that the certificate is valid, but they can only have 3 interns at a time on their farm. And interns are also exempt from minimum wage and employment security premiums, meaning that there's no minimum wage required in this program. However, farms do choose to offer stipends or housing and or meals just so they can recruit these interns to their farms. These farmers do create incentives for interns to apply and usually these interns come from out of state, so they do need somewhere to live in the duration of the internship. Like I said, this is mainly for education, not so much for making money. It's to learn about that, all the aspects of farming. And I'll have time for questions at the very end, so if you could just keep them till the end, and then I'll be happy to answer them. So with this participation with the project, workers' compensation coverage is required. Um, it protects both the intern just in case they get hurt, and like I said, the farmer's assets, so that, I mean, a serious injury could deplete a lot of money from this farm. So they have to be sure to be covered just in case anything happens. I know I heard Melissa talking about the risk classifications as well, and it is based on the type of work that they perform. There's actually 3 risk classifications that an intern would fall under, and Labor and Industries created these 3 for this internship, so that since they're just working to learn, it's not like actual employment, but they do fall under the risk classification. And I can explain to that more if you'd like. You can always reach out to me by email, like I said. And they do work with the L&I account, or we work with the account manager to determine those risk classes. Pretty much just explain to them what's going on with their farm, what type of work they do, and that account manager will help them set those rates. And those, the 2 account managers for the farm internship project, we actually have 2 of them dedicated to the farm internship project itself. Stephanie Henderson, which is in our central office, she can answer any questions as far as what my rates would be. Just let them know what type of work you do, as well as David Pryor. He'd be happy to help as well. So that's what we use as far as the requirements go. Now I'm going to move on to the certification process on how to apply, how to be part of this farm internship project. The application process is pretty simple. Basically, what they have to do is just complete the application, which is a 1-page type of application. They do have to give us a copy of the Schedule F, the IRS 1040 form, in order for us to see how much are their gross sales for the year. And it doesn't have to be the most recent. It could be like the previous year, and we'll take that as proof. And then again, they'll have to attach that educational curriculum. This is an opportunity for the farmer to create their own curricula or curriculum. It gives them a chance to be creative and structure their educational plan the way they would like. And then again, interns have to feel like they're learning something. So they have to base it off of, books, or some people actually do classes with the WSU extension. I know that some farms actually work with WSU to have their interns go to these classes, learn a little bit about soil, and then they go out and actually do the practice on the farm. So it's actually pretty cool. We actually have a lot of questions about it, but we do have reference materials. We have ATRA, which is a website where you can actually go in there and look up examples of curriculums. And since I'm the one that reviews it, I'm okay with copy and paste of other examples to make your own, but you do have to follow that program throughout the year. And in order for us to find out, or just to figure out that everything is going okay, I go out to do compliance checks, make sure that those students or interns are feeling like they are being taught something and not just used as labor per se. So I'll go ahead and move on to the next. So as far as the certificate that they receive, the information on the approved certificate usually has the name of the farm, how long the certificate will be valid, and typically it's about just 1 year that the certificate is valid. So some people apply in February, then it expires until next February. They've got to tell us the number of interns they would like to hire throughout that year, and then any wage rate or stipends that they'll be giving out, room and board, if any, and other compensations, such as some people actually take the interns to farmers market, and they give them baskets of food or whatever it may be. So for them, can I take the cost of instruction materials on Schedule F? are you referring to like to show you how much the salary is, or maybe I'm just not understanding the question? Okay, well, I'll go ahead and keep that in mind. Let me go ahead and finish this off, and yeah, I'll keep it for the end. So, like I said, the certificate expiration date is 12 months from the approval date. Um, as far as taxes go, since I just started with the farm internship project, I'm not 100% sure. If you want to send me an email for tax deductions, I know some people write off like the stipends that they give out to their interns. But like I said, I'm not too sure. So feel free to send me an email. And like I said, I'll provide that at the very end of this presentation. But send me an email. I'll send it to my supervisor, and we'll talk about it. See if we can figure out what can be written off, for tax deduction or stipends that you may give out. So I hope that makes sense. Okay, so let me go ahead and move on. Okay, so the farm mentorship agreement. The farm mentorship agreement is actually just a statements showing information on the agreement that the intern and the farmer come to. So, for example, it will have the description of the internship program, what type of objectives or skills that program is going to teach the intern, if there will be any type of stipend, responsibilities, expectations, obligations of the farm and the intern, roughly an estimate of the hours that you'll be spending on this farm per week or per month, and then any curriculum instruction hours per week, wages, room board, stipends, others. So this will have all the information that an intern wants to know about what they're getting themselves into. So this must be filled out prior to the intern starting work. And this is in order to understand the terms and conditions of employment per se. And of course, this protects the farmer in case of any complaints for wages, any unpaid wages, minimum wage requirements. They know that they're not entitled to minimum wage. So this will actually give them the rundown of what will happen throughout those 12 months. Okay, thank you, Laura. 5 minutes left. I'm almost done. I'll go ahead and actually go with the unpaid internships, which is the next here. So just in case you don't fall under the farm internship project, there are other ways to have interns on your farm. And Melissa did touch on it just a little bit when she said that, for-profit organizations can have student volunteers or unpaid students participating in a work-based learning program, an institution of higher learning. So there's actually a fact sheet. It's called Unpaid Internships 101, and it breaks down in case you don't, or you're not in those counties, or you just don't qualify for the farm internship project. You can actually apply for this type of internship. So the internship here, they have to follow a 6-step test in order to verify whether that person is an employee or an intern. All of the 6 parts have to be met in order for the trainees to be considered, intern and not an employee. If for some reason one of them does not apply, then they would be considered employees. Usually the biggest holdup is that number 4, the business derives no immediate advantage. That is because it's pretty hard to prove that this worker that you're hiring as a intern, if they're going to be working like an employee, or they'll be taking this as a learning experience. So the court usually is the one who decides who has the bigger advantage, the employer or the employee. And then again, that unpaid internships 101 fact sheet will actually help explain what I'm talking about. And then, like Melissa said, workers' compensation coverage is not required when they're unpaid internships. They can actually opt to get coverage, but it will only be for medical aid benefits. And those benefits are available to businesses utilizing qualifying student volunteers or unpaid students. The unpaid internships is a little complicated, so in case of any questions, feel free to reach out to us, and we will try to answer those questions as best as possible. So that's the end of my presentation. That way I won't take too much of your time, but there's my contact information. Feel free to jot it down and send me an email in case I wasn't clear with something. I know this is a little rushed, but yeah, feel free to give me a call or shoot me an email. But besides that, does anybody have any questions? I'll leave that up there so that you can see it there. Uh-oh. Not at this time. Okay, well, I appreciate you giving me the time, Laura, and thank you everyone for being here today. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. I will be available Monday to Friday, 8 to 5. So feel free to shoot me an email or give me a call. Thank you, Laura, and you all have a great day.